15 years ago, that was not a thing, right? And it was pioneering work in worms.
In worms.
Worms, literally worms. Like literally a worm, right? That the worm and its life, its cycle depends on these kinds of disordered proteins.
Wow.
And it was really that work, which I believe is going to lead to a Nobel Prize sooner than later, is now what we're actively discovering in Alzheimer's and in so many other fields, right? So
Welcome to Holy Shift, Biomedical Breakthrough Shaping Tomorrow. What is biomedical engineering exactly? It's about engineering solutions that improve human health, from new medical imaging tools to personalized cancer treatments. Holy Shift reveals the people, passion, and purpose powering the future of biomedical research. Today on Holy Shift, we're joined by Dr. Felipe Quiroz, a biomedical engineer at Emory and Georgia Tech. Felipe grew up in Colombia and has spent his career uncovering how proteins in our cells can shape a variety of diseases, from eczema to Alzheimer's. His lab is creating new tools to study how brain diseases like Alzheimer's develop, and even designing brand new mini machines inside human cells that could transform future treatments. When he's not making scientific breakthroughs, you'll find him rollerblading on the Atlanta Beltline. Get ready for a conversation that connects cutting-edge science with everyday health and shows how curiosity and creativity can open doors to amazing discoveries. Welcome to the podcast, to the Holy Shift Research Podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Angela. I'm super excited to be here with you, and thank you for inviting me.
So tell the audience what your name is, what research you do, what lab you're in, a little bit about you.
So my name is Felipe Quiroz. I'm an assistant professor here in Culture BME. I've been here for 5 years. And we are engineers of proteins, of cells, of genes. So the kind of engineering that we do happens at the level of these almost invisible biomolecules.
Okay, if you're thinking about like what proteins and genes, how does that translate into the world? What is a biomolecule, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so, it's part of the reason why it's sometimes difficult to talk of this kind of engineering, because we don't see it, right? These are things that are so small. But really, all of what happens in our bodies, right, is fueled by these biomolecules. So proteins are the ones doing all the things that happen in our bodies.
Okay.
And so when something goes wrong in disease, often it's because a protein broke.
Can you give us an example of some disease state?
One that we focus on is Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
Where when we look at the brain of a patient with Alzheimer's disease, you start seeing aggregates, clumps of proteins that are supposed to be happily moving around the cell and somehow found themselves in one spot.
Oh.
And the kinds of proteins that do that are a family of proteins that we call disordered proteins. And I say that because most people who took, say, biology in high school wouldn't even know that there is something called disordered proteins.
Yeah.
But when they break, they cause all kinds of diseases of the brain, neurodegeneration in general. Alzheimer's being, of course, the most prominent,
right,
and one that my lab has been focused on over the last few years.
Okay, so you run a lab at Georgia Tech and Emory in the Biomedical Engineering Culture department. Yes. How did you tell us a little bit about your journey? Like, were you, when you were a little kid, did you always want to be a biomedical engineer? What did you want to be? Well,
biomedical engineering is such a new field, right? So when I was growing up, it wasn't even there really, at least not prominently.
Same here. I wish it was, actually.
Right. I mean, there was biomedical engineering in the 70s already, but it was very niche, right? It was kind of only something you would do in graduate school, perhaps, not at the level of an undergraduate training. But when I was in middle school, I took a biology class. And that biology class, the teacher, a really good teacher, he told us that there were engineers in the U.S., I'm from Colombia, were just decoding the human genome. They were literally reading all the letters in the human genome, what basically has all the instructions for life.
Right.
And I was like, wow, that's amazing. What kind of engineers are those? I was very good at math. I was good in biology. That sounded like perfect.
Right.
So I was 7th grade. And since then, I was like, I want to become a genetic engineer, I thought.
Okay.
By the time that I graduated from high school, I was like, okay, where do I train in that?
Right.
There was nothing like a degree in genetic engineering, but there was a program in biomedical engineering that had just started 5 years prior to that. So the first cohort of biomedical engineers in Colombia graduated 5 years before I entered college. This was the first program in Colombia.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate to start that program. The idea was that biomedical engineering was a path to genetic engineering. And so even at that stage, I was thinking, okay, I want to do biomedical engineering and I want to learn whatever it takes to then do post-graduation at the graduate level, genetic engineering. That was kind of my dream. Inspired by the human genome and the efforts to learn what the human genome looks like to eventually manipulate those genes.
I love this. And one of the things I was just thinking about when you're talking about is we often forget how important science, technology, education is, STEM fields, our mathematics are in those middle school years, and how really fostering the students, especially the ones who see something and they say, oh, I see this DNA that, who is it, Watson and Crick? Did I get that right? That they figured out. And how amazing that you can use these skills. And I want to do something similar to that. And then to have the path that you could do that.
Yeah, at the time, when I first learned of the genetic engineers doing this kind of work, I mean, the human genome was like a puzzle, right? So even then, there was a lot of hope that there would be therapies and transformational, changes in medicine. That's even more true today, right? So today, we actually do have that map. Funny enough, it took many, many years to actually get it right. So actually just 2 years ago or so, we actually finally got what is considered kind of the final map. But so yeah, the opportunities are here for students to be inspired to actually take on these challenges. There's a lot of cool stuff happening. I was actually talking to a high school student recently, and he was telling me about what he wanted to do. He wanted to be an anesthesiologist. I was like, okay, tell me more about it. Why? He's suddenly fascinated with medicine. He wants his grandma to have a doctor in the family. I was like, oh, that's so cool.
I like that.
But then I told him, well, you're in Georgia, right? So why don't you consider biomedical engineering for your training? We have the best.
Right, we do.
Literally the best. As of the latest rankings program in biomedical engineering. You should think about it. And he's like, oh, what is that? And he actually didn't know about it, even though he's a super smart high school student, really good at math, really good at biology, but hadn't been exposed here in Georgia, where we have the best program.
Right.
So he's now really excited about it. I'm sharing the podcast that you guys did with Mike, and he loved it. So yeah, I think there is a lot to inspire for sure.
Yeah. Okay, I love this. Okay, let's dig in a little bit about, now you've talked on a high level about what your research is that you do. Can you tell us a little bit about the work being done in your lab and the impact? Because I know that one of the things that is hard to understand is that you have to do these building blocks. It's like building a house, right? You have to have the foundation in order the rest of it. And that piece, that foundation piece, is so critical. And the discoveries that happen at that piece are so impactful. And they're required in order to ever get to somewhere that we are actually curing. We're not curing cancer or curing some of these things. So tell us a little bit about the work that you and your team are doing in your lab.
Yeah, that's a great question because, biomedical engineering happens at all kinds of stages in the spectrum of translation, like literally deploying a therapy. My lab certainly operates at an earlier stage where we are really still tackling really unsolved problems. And it will take us certainly, investments of an additional maybe 10, 15 years to see that, playing out in the clinic, for example. But we love it because the progress that we made at this very foundational level has major translational potential across disciplines, right? So we, for example, are motivated, let's say, by Alzheimer's, right?
Okay.
But say last week I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine in pediatrics who does HIV research. Okay. Turns out that the same technologies that we developed to study disorder proteins, which play a role in Alzheimer's, also play a role in how viruses assemble within cells, how viruses form in a cell, and particularly HIV virus.
Okay.
So the same technology literally that we're developing today, the best technology we have in my lab that we're just about to publish, well, we're in the latest stages of preparing that publication to study Alzheimer's, will now be helpful potentially to study HIV research as well, right? So we love the fact that these earlier investments have essentially an unknown number of potential paths that they can then have an impact on. So we love that. And when we write our stories and tell people about what we're doing, we make sure that they know that, hey, what we're doing very foundationally here, yes, we care about it because it's going to help Alzheimer's disease patients, but hey, it's also going to help these other fields. So biomedical engineering has that beauty that because we're dealing with these very interesting technologies that are manipulating molecules, well, these molecules have so many roles in physiology that we basically cannot even predict what's going to happen with them in 10, 15 years.
Right.
So very exciting. Very exciting to sort of invest in this kind of technology development to understand what's fundamentally happening inside a cell, because then that opens up so many opportunities for future applications. And we love that. That's kind of what motivates me, and I think many of the students in my team. When I recruit students, I'm looking for those students who really get excited by that unknown. Like, oh my God, I could in 10 years be working in something completely different that I couldn't predict today.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your lab, about the students that are in your lab. And I'm not sure how long your lab has been running, but do you
5 years.
Okay, 5 years. So do you have some that have now graduated from your lab and they're in other areas?
About to. So
Amazing.
I'm really excited to see where they go, right? So they acquire skills now that they can take in so many directions. And I always encourage them to maybe inspire a little bit by my own path, sort of you begin here, you then bring new skills, and then you become someone who is uniquely positioned to tackle new problems. So they are also dreaming of that. Like, okay, where do I go next? What kinds of challenges can I tackle next? Because the tools that they have acquired really prepares them for dreaming of going into new directions. So they may be working in Alzheimer's, they may be working in something completely different, right? As I mentioned, HIV perhaps, right?
Right.
So it's a mixture of, it's biomedical engineers. So we recruit really excellent biomedical engineers, some with more of a chemistry background, some with more of a biology background. We have some neuroscience type people in the lab, biology. So it's a mixture certainly of expertise that we have. And we also bring collaborators that are in other areas, particularly in the neuroscience space, neurology. So we have really strong support here at Emory particularly. We have some really beautiful clinical work happening in addressing some of these disorders of neurodegeneration, and we benefit from their progress, right? So we bring their expertise into our lab as well to be able to tackle the challenges, because one group like mine, which has this very deep expertise in proteins, does not have the expertise in some of the neuroscience, neurology that we need to bring in to really make an impact.
Which is really important, because when you think about proteins or throughout our whole body, and the impact, as you mentioned, could have an impact on every single potential challenge the human body could ever have. Okay.
Yes.
And then when you focus on a particular area, so neuroscience, so you focus on the brain in areas of that, especially when you're talking about Alzheimer's. How amazing is it? We actually interview Dr. Annabelle Singer and her work in Alzheimer's,
I love her work,
right?
yeah.
And she's amazing. And so when you think about how amazing it is to be at such a phenomenal institute, that you have the ability to also bring in the best of each of these and collaborate together, which is really special.
And you mentioned Annabelle, I think there's an appreciation here of the different stages. Like, so for example, one of those at Emory who has supported me heavily is Alan Levy, who's one of the really key figures in Alzheimer's research in the US, certainly here at Emory. He leads one of the big centers on Alzheimer's disease here. And I know he collaborates and helps Annabelle majorly, tremendously with her clinical trials. But he's also very excited about supporting the early investments in the technologies that we have to study Alzheimer's, right? So it's people who are aware of the importance of this whole spectrum of investment. Super fortunate to be here. It's been a lot of fun. Love my students, my team, and the support that we've gotten from so many others, in different departments at Emory and at Tech to carry on this research.
Okay, so tell me what brought you to Atlanta. Was it the Beltline? Because I hear you like to hang out on the Beltline in Atlanta.
I love the Beltline. For those who are not in Atlanta, the Beltline is an amazing infrastructure that we have to bring community together, so people come, exercise, walk around it.
Rollerblade out here?
I love rollerblading. I'm from Colombia, so I grew up in Colombia at a time. In fact, when I meet people who are rollerblading on the Beltline, there's a good chance they might be from Colombia. It's kind of funny.
Oh, wow.
It was very popular in Colombia in the 80s and the early 90s. So I was doing it as a teenager.
It was popular here. I had a pair of rollerblades.
It was very popular here too. I hear that. And so people are now coming back to it. I did as well. And it's a good way for me to release stress and have fun. And I enjoy it. The Atlanta Beltline certainly is a big plus. I wasn't aware of it though when I came to Atlanta. I came here for Culture BME.
Okay.
I really did. I think my own path is kind of unique in that, well, not unique, but certainly interesting in that I was actually studying stem cells and skin biology for my postdoctoral research. Now I told you a lot about Alzheimer's, right? So I switched from skin to brain, and but I thought that the best place to do is kind of mixtures of different kinds of research focus areas is biomedical engineering.
Yeah.
Because we really have the kind of mixture of expertise that is required. And so I came to Atlanta for Culture BME, and I love it. And I also, I grew up in a big city in Colombia, Medellin, and I love the city life. So I think Atlanta offers that amazing mixture.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think about in Atlanta, or when also, I serve on the College of Engineering board and on GTAB at Georgia Tech, the board to the president. And when we're recruiting amazing people like yourself, so many times they come and visit and they say, wow, look at the parks, look at the trees.
The trees, oh my God, I love
it's
the trees.
so beautiful. And Atlanta has so much to offer. It's part of the reason I took over Biolocity was to really help build the community here.
This is a great place to build. And congratulations on what you're doing with Biolocity. Love it. So.
Thank you. Okay, so tell me, we want to talk a little bit about beyond the science. So you've talked a little bit about the students in your lab, but beyond the science, can you tell the impact that you want your lab to have on the community? So including the jobs and those pieces of it, but can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love the inspirational aspect of it, right? So when I mentioned this high school student in here in Georgia, right? So we want to definitely inspire the next generation. So when I go and interact with people, when I go and give a lecture, when I go and give a talk, I'm really thinking of trying to inspire people, right? So I think giving my best in everything that I do to show them, hey, there are people that are really committed to advancing the next technologies, right? And that's how I try to do it in my own one-on-one interactions with students in my lab. But again, it could be mentoring. I'm from Columbia, as I mentioned, so I'm the faculty advisor for a Latin organization of students at Georgia Tech, and I care a lot about how they grow in this environment, right? And helping them succeed.
Really, and we know that people who come from different backgrounds and different specialties, when they're all put together, you can really have some magic in what you can accomplish and new ideas that you can come up with.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, they think of different things, right? They've seen different issues. They've grown up in such different environments that their inhibitions are different.
Yes.
The things they're drawn to are different. So it's just that kind of diversity that really helps. You approach the problems in a way that maybe others wouldn't. And so we are fortunate to have this very, very good mixture of expertise and backgrounds. Yes.
Amazing. Okay, let's talk about the funding and kind of the cost of the research. Because when I think about it, I said this earlier when we were talking, right? The best time to plant a tree is 100 years ago.
Yes.
The next best time is today. But it's often hard for us to think, oh, wait, we want to plant a tree. We need to have a tree to plant. We want to invest the time, the money, and the energy because we're maybe not going to be here 100 years, right? So I want to talk about how hard is it with the work that you're doing that is building this wealth of knowledge that will, and when we say translational, we mean moving from an academic setting into the world where you're actually applying it to a patient. So how hard is it to get people to see that vision and to actually fund that vision?
Yeah, the National Institutes of Health, of course, have been, doing an amazing job, over the last 50 or more years investing in basic science. There's no doubt about that. What I'll say that is particular to my lab, I've been very fortunate. I think I was part of a generation of scientists and engineers that have benefited tremendously from a shift in mindset in National Institutes of Health and other funders, where they realized that, hey, we really need to take high risk. This is what now is known as high risk, high reward. So you're okay having high risk if you think the reward is high, really high.
Right.
So, very early in my training, I was fortunate to be selected by an organization called the Burroughs Wellcome Fund. It's a nonprofit, and they're investing in this kind of work. And they gave me $500,000 to kind of pursue some of my interests and start my own lab. And then when I started my own lab, the National Institutes of Health helped me with an award called the New Innovator Award that is specifically geared towards this high risk, high reward. So NIH, since about 2007, when they launched this New Innovator program, they've been thinking, hey, we really need to have more energy spent into those long-term investments, because if they do work, they're going to be the ones that are going to drive a lot of the future progress. And I think that's been a shift, I guess, in thinking that maybe goes away from, this is my project, this is my outcome, to here we have these outstanding trained individuals who, if we give them some freedom to operate within these very interesting questions they're trying to solve, lots of good stuff is going to come out of it. And so, yes, it's not easy to get funding, I guess, in this long-term type of investment, but I've been fortunate that the institutions in the biomedical space have gained awareness that, hey, this is actually something that we should do more.
Yeah. I love this. And we think back about things like, for example, the theory of relativity, when he got an award for that, it was still just a theory, and the impact of those types of things of brilliant scientists in the past. If we were to lose that now, then the generations that we have coming after us would be significantly impacted.
I'll give you one example. The most prominent perhaps in my space, thinking of genes, genomes, the discovery of the scissors with which we cut very precisely the genome now. They're called genome editors. This is beautiful work that was very fundamental, looking at pathogens and how, how bacteria fight viruses. And it turns out that those fundamental studies now gave us the tools to manipulate genomes like that. And of course, it led to a Nobel Prize a few years back. But you already know that, right, when you're investing in those early technologies. Yes. The kind of work that I do with disordered proteins, 15 years ago, that was not a thing, right? And it was pioneering work in worms.
In worms?
Worms, literally worms. Like literally a worm, right? That the worm and its life, its cycle depends on these kinds of disordered proteins.
Wow.
And it was really that work, which I believe is going to lead to a Nobel Prize sooner than later, is now what we're actively discovering in Alzheimer's and in so many other fields, right? So the translational, again, the way I see translation in that case is a concept here, a discovery here now having impact in so many areas, right? So it's amazing.
That is amazing.
I find that really inspiring.
I have a new appreciation for like worm farms and stuff like that now.
Yes, exactly. I mean, they've been actually major warhorses of discovery, right? So there are many, many good examples. For me, disordered protein certainly is top of my mind.
So if you were going to say, what if in this day and age, we just decided we weren't going to fund this type of research? What do you think the impact on the community would be if that were the case?
Honestly, I think it would be a major shift in how we see healthcare today. I think in the US, we're very fortunate. I think we know that we have access to some of the best technologies in healthcare, in medicine, but there is also a sense of hope. I think the technology may not be there yet, but there is a sense of hope that there are things that are being tested, right? That there are things that will be available to you or your children. And the type of work that I do, these are, again, things that maybe will be the next generation of technologies, right? So I think if we lose this kind of investment, we will lose some of that hope. And I think that we need to protect that, right? We need to have a healthcare system that offers that, right? There's nothing more beautiful than that hope of a patient that might be having access to these technologies. For a mom or a dad, to know that their children might actually...
Or their grandchildren.
Or their grandchildren,
right?
yeah,
Yes.
It might take that long. Yes, exactly.
Yes, I think that's significant. I'll tell you, my grandfather was an engineer, and he actually was on patents for torpedoes.
Wow.
And so it was just cool to see some of the work that he did. I actually have some earrings and stuff on that. But being a grandchild of that, when you think about the work that we do and the impact, it's not about it is about the impact today.
Yes.
But it is also about the impact for generations.
I think the key is to build bridges, right?
Yes.
So when I focus on my work, we have short-term goals, we have midterm goals, and a vision. And we are motivated by each of those, right? And the more successful we are, only if we're able to show those bridges, right? Like how this step leads to the next and eventually to a very long arc towards a therapy, maybe.
I can see why you're a great mentor and why you love working with some of these individuals. That was a great way to describe this. So let's talk about, so we talked about rollerblading. Are there some other rituals in your day that you actually look forward to that you do every day?
Yes. I certainly spend a lot of time, interacting with students and being in my lab. I absolutely love it. Like many other scientists, I don't look at my work as a job. I just literally live it, and it's a hobby on its own. But you have to stay balanced. So rollerblading is part of that balance. I'm spiritual and religious as well. So, I like praying and reading the Bible and things like that. So I try to make time in the day for those things. It helps me stay balanced.
I love it. Okay, so when progress feels painfully slow, because I know this is the struggle, as you mentioned, those high risk, high reward,
yes.
That also means you're going to put things out there, and then if it's slow or it doesn't work, how do you keep yourself, and actually I think about this as a young in your career, how do you keep the people in your lab motivated as well?
Yes, that's a great question. For me, when I started my lab, a common analogy you hear is that labs that are starting are like startups. The startup world is, for those who are not familiar, these young companies that are working in really important problems and they think they can solve them, within a few years and hopefully make a big impact and have, of course, an economic downfall as well, right? And it's true, we as early labs have a little bit of that. We're kind of bringing new technologies, new ideas, and we bring a lot of excitement and energy. But at the same time, we are invested in training the next generation. So when I hire a student, I have a really good idea of how I wanted to spend their time because I think this technology, this path will lead to discovery, to new technologies. But I have to be aware that I am training someone.
Right.
So the difference is the startup is going to hire the person who is ready to execute. I'm going to hire the person that I think has the potential to grow into someone that may be even better than what I need.
Right.
Right. Because I want to train the next generation of leaders.
Right.
So I think an awareness of the fact that it's going to be slow. But at the same time, what I gain is the potential for going outside of the box. I'm not just telling them to go and do A and B.
Right.
I'm training to think of C, D, E, F, all the letters. So eventually, once they're ready, there's going to be an explosion of progress. That's kind of my hope. And I think that's kind of what they also feel, that my students, that yes, this is kind of difficult. It's taking time to train, but I know what I'm gaining. I know what the future is going to look like to some extent in terms of being able to tackle really, really exciting problems. So for me, again, that's the motivation. It doesn't matter if it's slow, because I know the value in that slowness, the fact that the students are gaining something that is so hard to give.
Yes.
It's intangible, right? I don't have a recipe for how to give this. So it has to happen in these one-on-one interactions. It has to happen through trial and error and mistakes. We want to minimize those. We want to make sure our investments, our tax dollars are well spent. But part of the investment is in people.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because oftentimes when we think about the cost that it takes to run research, we think about expensive drugs, we think about the infrastructure, so the buildings, all of those things. And yet the other outcome, the outcome is the advances in the technologies that are going to make it such a huge impact. But the other outcome is the people, because every single person that you inspire is then going to inspire more people. And that cascade impact, doesn't it just make you so proud?
I was actually having a conversation with a friend of mine over the weekend, and he asked me, hey, Felipe, if one of your ideas, say with Alzheimer's, really has a big impact, and say this happens in the context of a drug, right? And there's, of course, a lot of financial interests, maybe you will sell a company for hundreds of millions of dollars. Could happen.
Right.
Would you still work? Right. And I would say absolutely yes. And it's not just me. Like if I think of those who have been very successful in biomedical engineering, these people could be billionaires, in fact. But what they continue doing by training the next generation, these are 100 companies with 100 leaders who will themselves train so many more. So I think we're here invested in training the next generation. So I do think that for me, that's, as much as I love the research, and don't get me wrong, like I want the results. Like I really do. Like I really want that discovery. I really want that new tool.
Right.
But I really thought, I really went through this process as I was starting my lab and thinking, this is not a startup. This is about people, And so I think with that in mind, I'm still getting a kick out of the discoveries that we're making, but I'm okay with taking the slow part.
Yes. So I don't recall if you already said this, but how did you make it to the United States?
Well, I was, again, fortunate. I told you I was part of this biomedical engineering department that was very young. It was the first one in Colombia. So, again, how lucky that I was part of that.
Right, yeah.
Because of that, it was actually an undergraduate-only institution. There were no, at the time, master's or PhD programs. You would think that's not good for research, right? Which is true. It's not good for research, but it comes with some benefits. So what happened was I was a very, committed student, very active. And as they were starting to think of research and creating research labs, there were no people to run experiments, right? So who is going to be running those experiments? I was one of them. So I was fortunate that in those early years, I got exposure to research opportunities that would be very hard to access today, right? Because now you have another kind of infrastructure where maybe you will be the PhD student, the one running that experiment. But at the time, there wasn't. So I was the one running those experiments. What happened was, come the end of my undergraduate degree program, I had a lot of research experience. So I was able to interface with researchers, biomedical engineers here in the US, and tell them, hey, here's my story. Here are the products that I've been able to be a part of. I would love to be part of your lab. I probably sent maybe 50 or 100 emails. And I'm still surprised by how many people responded, to be honest. So because of that, when people reach out to me, I try to also respond and say,
same.
hey, I may not have an opportunity for you, but think of this, right?
Right.
So yeah, very fortunate, honestly. I was just at the right time, in the right place, got a lot of exposure to research, which helped me, tell people in the US that I was somewhat talented, who had a lot of desire to contribute. When you look at grades, for example, it's almost meaningless, right? As you go between country borders. But the research products are easy to understand. Like, oh, I see a research manuscript that says that, right? So they can interpret that as a sign of potential.
Right.
And I was fortunate to be selected to study here in the US. I was at Duke University for my PhD. So as soon as I graduated from college, I traveled to the US for my PhD and then decided to stay longer for my postdoctoral training. I was actually thinking of going back to Colombia to start as a professor there, but then was given an opportunity to work with one of the leaders in stem cell and skin biology in New York. And once I visited her lab, I was like, I need to be here. Like, I need to be part of that environment. So it was just a fascination of kind of the opportunities that were opening up to me as I was growing.
And I know you mentioned stem cells earlier, and we talked about stem cells in our inner episode 1 with Dr. Mike Davis.
I love it. I actually presented it to my class because it deals with stem cells. So
nice.
I hope they're listening to that.
Oh, yeah. Well, they must, right? It's a requirement. It's a grade, participation grade in your class. Okay. But can you describe to the world what are stem cells?
These are amazing cells in our body that are able to evolve into a lot of different kinds of cell types. The kind of stem cell work that we're doing right now is more really kind of beautiful in that we're actually pushing those cells to do things that they wouldn't normally want to do. But the technologies have evolved to a point that I can take a cell from your skin and turn it into a brain cell. And that brain cell can then lead to the formation of a small portion of your brain tissue. So going back to the Alzheimer's interest, we now can run our experiments with human tissues, essentially, that are taken from these patients, but in a fairly non-invasive manner because it's coming from the skin.
Right.
But because they carry the information from that patient, those mini tissues in the lab-grown tissues end up having some of the pathology that you see in the Alzheimer's disease patients.
Right.
So these stem cells, again, are cells that are able to begin as, say, a fetus-like cell very early in development to then becoming a brain cell, as Mike said, maybe something cardiac. So really cells that have a lot of potential for forming different kinds of cell types. And I teach a class on this we call stem cell engineering. So how do we expand the safety and the potency of stem cells? So for example, what Mike is doing with his clinical trials, really awesome work. These are the cells that are harvested and injected. What we're thinking is, as engineers, now we actually have the ability to manipulate proteins and genes. So how do we expand the safety and the potency of those cells so that they do more things, so they become other kinds of cells, or maybe the right kind of cell?
Which we've tied to so many times in this episode, how important, for example, someone studying proteins is to someone studying cardiac or brain issues or some of these other areas. I love how that all comes together. So tell the listeners how they can follow the research that you're doing. How can they find you and follow your lab?
So we have a website, and so I welcome everyone to visit us on our website, and we constantly post our latest research. So we try to, create news pieces that tell people, hey, this is the latest thing that we accomplished.
Yeah.
And this is how we're investing in the next generation of tools and discovery tools. That's the main avenue for people to learn about our work, our website. I'm not on social media, unfortunately, so I wouldn't be able to give you a handle to follow. But we do try to keep our website very kind of, updated. So we want people to be able to see what we're doing.
Yeah, this is amazing. Well, I want to say thank you for your passion and your discipline and patience. It really takes a special human being to work in research that the results of you may not actually see, but future generations will see. And that takes really someone who cares about humanity so much. So thank you for all the work that you do.
Well, thank you for having me and for this podcast. I think it's a great space that you all created for telling to a broader audience what Culture BME is trying to do and what the great people that we have here in Culture BME are trying to do. Students, faculty, staff.
Love it.
Thank
Love
you.
it. Thank you. Great job. That's that's it for this episode of Holy Shift, Biomedical Breakthroughs Shaping Tomorrow. If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, pass it along to someone eager to explore the power of research to change lives. As a reminder, the opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guest and do not represent those of any organization mentioned. Be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. To learn more about the research featured on this show, visit bme.gatech.edu or check the show notes for links and resources. Thanks for listening, and remember, behind every innovation is a purpose, a person, and a powerful story.